The room held its breath before anyone else did. Glass walls rose on all sides, clear and cold, turning the boardroom into a suspended box above the city. 40 floors below, traffic moved like a slow river of light, unaware of the quiet pressure building in this space. The air conditioning hummed softly. Screens glowed blue along the walls. Leather chairs sat in a perfect ring around the polished table, waiting. And at the center of it all stood Daniel Cross. He didn't pace. He didn't fidget. He didn't need to. His presence alone shifted gravity. Tailored suit, perfect posture, a face built from symmetry and confidence. Eyes that didn't ask questions, they issued them. Bring her in. The assistant hesitated just a fraction too long. Daniel noticed. His gaze flicked toward her. The hesitation disappeared. The door opened. She stepped inside holding a mop. Not a folder, not a tablet, not a notebook, a mop. Her uniform was clean but worn, the fabric softened by hundreds of washes. Blue apron, yellow gloves tucked into her pocket, hair tied back with a plain elastic, no jewelry, no makeup meant for rooms like this. She paused at the threshold. The silence weighed on her immediately. 10 executives sat around the table. All eyes turned. Her shoulders pulled inward. Name? Daniel asked. Lena, she said quietly. Her voice barely traveled. Full name. Lena Morales. Daniel nodded once. Lena Morales, he repeated, as if tasting the sound of it. You clean this floor every morning? Yes, sir. How long? 3 years. 3 years, he echoed again. His eyes moved over her without apology. Not lustful, not cruel, assessing. Like a commodity. You've been listening to our meetings. Her eyes widened. No, sir, I just clean. I don't listen. I don't. Daniel raised one finger. She stopped speaking instantly. He leaned forward slightly, resting both hands on the edge of the table. You hear things, she swallowed. People talk, he continued, even when they think no one important is around. A few of the executives shifted. Not in disagreement, in discomfort. Daniel straightened. So today, Lena Morales, you're not here to clean. Her fingers tightened around the mop handle. You're here to help us. A nervous laugh escaped her before she could stop it. She covered her mouth. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I don't think. You think, Daniel said calmly. Everyone thinks. Most people just aren't invited to speak. He gestured toward an empty chair. Sit. She didn't move. He didn't repeat himself. She stepped forward. The mop leaned awkwardly against the wall behind her as she lowered herself into a chair that cost more than everything she owned. Her back stayed straight, too straight. Her hands folded in her lap. The room watched her. Daniel took his seat. Gentlemen, he said, and Amelia. A woman across from him lifted her chin slightly. Our firm is considering a significant pivot. A screen lit up behind him. Graphs, numbers. Rising, falling, intersecting. We've mastered infrastructure, energy, logistics, defense, data. He turned his head toward Lena. Lena Morales, what do you invest in? Her eyes darted to the screen, then to the people, then back to Daniel. I don't, she said honestly. Daniel smiled, not warmly. Everyone invests in something. She hesitated. My son, she said. A few eyebrows lifted. My mother, she added quietly. My time, my energy, my health, my hope. Silence. Daniel's smile tightened. That's poetic, he said. But I meant money. She shook her head. I don't have any. A pause, then a few soft chuckles. Not loud, contained, polite. Daniel lifted his hand. The room stilled again. No money, he repeated. Yet you survive. Yes. How? She shrugged slightly. I work. How much do you make? Her throat tightened. I'd rather not. Daniel's gaze sharpened. She exhaled. Enough to live. How much? He asked again. She whispered the number. It barely existed next to the zeros on the screen behind him. Daniel nodded. Fascinating. He leaned back. So here is the game. She flinched at the word. Our analysts disagree about the future of one particular sector. The screen shifted. A title appeared. Water Infrastructure and Control Markets. The world is drying, Daniel said calmly. Climate stress, population growth, migration, conflict. He looked around. We see profit. Then he looked at her. What do you see? Her breath caught. She stared at the screen. Longer this time. The charts weren't familiar, but the words were. Water, shortage, access, control. She thought of the neighborhood she grew up in, of rationing, of plastic containers stacked in bathrooms, of waiting for trucks, of mothers waking children before dawn, of fights at taps, of hands pushing, of voices rising. I see fear, she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Fear, he repeated. Yes, fear is profitable. She looked at him, not challenging, just direct. For a while. A few executives inhaled. Daniel tilted his head. Go on, she swallowed. When people are afraid, they pay anything, she said. They give up rights, dignity, privacy, land, even their children's futures. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke. But fear burns fast. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. What replaces it? Anger, she said. Then violence. The room felt smaller. You can sell water, she continued, but you can't sell thirst forever. Eventually, people don't pay. They take. Silence. Thick, heavy. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're suggesting our investment creates instability. I'm saying it creates something you can't control. A beat. Daniel's lips curved again. Interesting, he said. He tapped the table. But we already control water. She shook her head slowly. You control pipes, she said. You don't control drought. You don't control rain. You don't control when a mother decides she has nothing left to lose. Her voice softened. That's when systems break. No one laughed now. No one breathed loudly. Daniel studied her. Not as a joke, not as a novelty, as a variable. You think we should not invest? She shook her head again. I think you should invest differently. His eyes sharpened. How? In access, she said. In storage, in resilience, in making water harder to steal, not easier to own. A pause. You don't sell survival, she said quietly. You support it. Then you profit from stability. Daniel stared at her. Seconds passed, then more. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. For the first time in the room, Daniel Cross looked unsure. Not lost, not afraid, paused, as if a mechanism inside him had hit unexpected resistance. Who taught you this? He asked. She hesitated. My father, she said, before he died. A softer silence replaced the earlier one. What did he do? Daniel asked. He built wells. Daniel leaned back slowly. Where? Villages, she said, where no one else went. A long breath passed through the room. Daniel folded his hands. You're telling me my analysts are wrong. She shook her head. No, I'm saying they're incomplete. A subtle smile touched his mouth. That's a generous insult. She didn't smile back. I'm not trying to insult anyone. Why are you trying? He asked. She met his eyes. Because you asked. Something shifted. Not in the room, in him. He straightened. You can lead, he said. Her body moved before her mind did. She stood quickly. Thank you, she whispered. She reached for her mop. Her hand trembled slightly. As she turned toward the door, Daniel spoke again. Lena Morales. She froze. Yes? What would you do, he asked, if you had my resources? She paused, not long, just long enough. I would make sure no child ever learned the sound of thirst before the sound of their own laughter, she said. She opened the door. Light spilled in. She stepped through. The door closed behind her. The room exhaled. No one spoke. Daniel didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on the empty chair, on the space she left, on the words she took with her. And something he had never prepared for began to rise quietly inside him. Not doubt, not regret. Recognition. Recognition. It unsettled him more than fear ever had. Fear was predictable. Fear could be modeled, priced, leveraged. Fear bent people into shapes that systems could use. Recognition did something else. It loosened the structure. Daniel Cross remained seated long after the room began to move again. Amelia cleared her throat softly. One executive shifted in his chair. Another reached for his tablet. No one spoke. Not because they were waiting for permission, because they felt something they didn't have language for. Daniel stood, slowly, deliberately. His chair slid back with a quiet sound that cut through the stillness. "Meeting adjourned," he said. The words were neutral, but the tone carried finality. No one argued, no one lingered. They gathered their things and left the glass box one by one, footsteps soft on the floor, as if louder movement might break whatever fragile thing had just formed. Daniel didn't look at any of them. He walked to the window instead. The city pulsed below him again. Lights moved. People hurried. Lives unfolded in directions he had never needed to notice. He stood there longer than he intended. The image of her stayed with him. Not her face, her stillness. The way she didn't shrink when he pressed. The way she didn't perform. The way she didn't try to please. She answered as if truth was enough. His assistant appeared quietly behind him. "She's waiting by the elevators," she said. Daniel didn't turn. "Why?" "She thinks she's in trouble." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Ask her to come back." A pause. Politely. Another pause. The assistant nodded and left. Minutes passed. The door opened again. Lena stepped in. Her shoulders were tighter this time. Her eyes more cautious. "Yes," she said. Daniel turned from the window. He didn't sit. He didn't lean. He stood in front of her, without the table between them. "What did you mean?" he asked. "By recognition." She blinked. "I didn't say that word." "I did," he replied. She hesitated. "I'm not sure," she said. "It just felt like you saw something you weren't looking for." His jaw tightened. "And what was that?" She studied him carefully now. Not his wealth, not his power, his weight. "You're tired," she said. The room felt smaller again. Daniel almost laughed. Almost. "Tired of what?" he asked. She chose her words with care. "Tired of winning games that never end." Silence. He stared at her. "You don't know me." "No," she agreed. "But I know that look." "From where?" "From people who have everything except relief." Something in his expression shifted. A crack, not visible, but real. He gestured toward the chair again. She sat, more cautiously this time. "Tell me about your father," he said. She blinked. "He's dead," she said. "I know." She waited. "He built wells," Daniel said. "Why?" She swallowed. "Because no one else would." "That's not a reason." It was his. Daniel studied her. "You believe he mattered?" "Yes, even though he changed nothing globally." She lifted her chin. "He changed everything, locally." Daniel's lips pressed together. "Scale matters," he said. "So does direction," she replied. Another pause. "You think I'm going in the wrong direction?" he said. "I think you're going very fast," she said, "and very alone." He stiffened. "I'm not alone." She didn't argue. She simply looked at him. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not admired, not feared. Seen. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "Maybe," she said, "but maybe not." The word hung between them, a soft bell, a subtle alarm. Daniel turned and walked back to the window. "Do you know how many people depend on me?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." "Millions of jobs," he continued. "Cities powered, systems stabilized, governments balanced." "Yes." "You think that makes me lonely?" "I think it makes you careful," she said. "And care eventually turns into isolation." He turned back. "Isolation is a choice." "So is honesty," she replied. He stared, not angrily, not challengingly, curiously. "You don't fear me," he said. "I respect consequences," she said, "not titles." A breath passed between them, then another. Daniel crossed his arms. What do you want? He asked. She frowned slightly. I don't understand. Everyone wants something. She considered. I want my son to grow up in a world that doesn't punish kindness, she said. Daniel let out a slow breath. That world doesn't exist. Not yet, she said. He shook his head. You're naive. She didn't deny it. You're exhausted, she said. His eyes flashed, then dimmed, then steadied. Sit, he said. She was already sitting. He moved closer. Not aggressively, not dominating, just nearer. Tell me what you would do, he said, if you ran this company. She hesitated. I wouldn't. That's not an answer. She inhaled. I would listen longer than I spoke, she said. I would invest in things that outlive quarterly reports. I would protect what can't protect itself. And I would stop pretending that profit is neutral. His brow furrowed. Profit is neutral. She shook her head. It shapes behavior. So does survival. Yes, she agreed. And so does dignity. He held her gaze. You think dignity scales. I think it multiplies. Another silence. Longer. Different. Daniel straightened. You should go, he said. She stood. She hesitated, then spoke softly. You don't have to become someone else, she said. You just have to remember you were someone before. He didn't answer. She turned and walked toward the door. Halfway there, she paused. Thank you for listening, she said. The door opened. She stepped out. The door closed again. Daniel stood alone, but something was different. Not lighter, not easier, more honest. He returned to his chair, sat, looked at the screen still glowing behind him. Graphs, trends, predictions. For the first time, they looked incomplete. Not wrong, but small. He reached out and turned the screen off. The room dimmed. The city remained, breathing, moving, waiting. And for the first time in a very long while, Daniel Cross felt something shift inside him that wasn't ambition. It was alignment, not with markets, not with power, with meaning. And meaning was not something he could buy. He stayed seated after the word finished echoing in his mind, not because he was tired, because standing felt dishonest. The room no longer felt like a command center. It felt like a mirror. Daniel rested his elbows on the table and looked at his own hands. They were steady, unshaking. They had signed thousands of contracts, authorized wars in everything but name, moved numbers that translated into entire cities rising or disappearing, and yet they had never built a well. He exhaled slowly. Not a sigh, a release. The assistant knocked once and entered. Yes? He asked without lifting his head. She's gone, she said. Daniel nodded. Of course she was. He hadn't expected her to wait. That wasn't who she was. He dismissed the assistant with a small gesture. The door closed again. The room was silent now. Not the tense silence from before, a softer one, the kind that makes space. Daniel stood, walked to the window again, watched the city breathe. He noticed details he had never cared about. A woman waiting at a crosswalk with a child who kept pulling her hand. A delivery rider wiping sweat from his face. A man kneeling beside a car with a flat tire. Tiny human problems, invisible to markets, visible to life. He didn't know how long he stood there. Time had loosened its grip. Eventually, he turned back to the table, picked up his phone, scrolled. Names, contacts, influence. He stopped on one. The head of strategic expansion. He didn't call. He opened a new note instead. He typed slowly, not because he lacked speed, because he wanted accuracy. Cancel the water acquisition proposal. He stared at the line, not to confirm, to accept. He added another line. Schedule internal review, long-term stability investments. He paused, added another. Bring community impact division into core strategy. The words felt strange, foreign, but not wrong. He saved the note, put the phone down, and for the first time since he could remember, he didn't immediately fill the silence. He let it exist. It felt unfamiliar, like a muscle that hadn't been used. A knock. Daniel turned. Yes. The door opened. Amelia stepped in. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. You canceled the water deal, she said. Yes. Why? He considered lying. He didn't. Because it's incomplete. Her eyes narrowed. It was profitable. Yes. That's not usually your standard for rejection. No. Then what changed? Daniel hesitated, not because he didn't know, because saying it felt like stepping into weather without protection. A woman with a mop, he said. Amelia blinked. You're joking. No. She studied him carefully. You're serious. Yes. Silence. Then a small laugh escaped her. Not mocking, disbelieving. You're restructuring the direction of a multinational corporation because of a cleaning lady. He met her gaze. Yes. She shook her head. You've lost perspective. No, he said quietly. I found it. She stared at him. Since when do you let emotion guide strategy? Since I realized strategy without emotion is just extraction. Her lips parted slightly. You're not the man I built this with. No, he agreed. I'm the man I avoided becoming. She exhaled sharply. This is dangerous. So is ignoring consequences. She paced once, then stopped. What happens when investors ask why you walked away from $1 billion opportunity? I'll tell them the truth. That you had a feeling? That I had information, he said, from a source I previously ignored. She stared. This is reckless. No, he said, this is responsible. She laughed once, bitter. You've gone soft. He shook his head. I've gone wide. Another silence. She looked at him differently now, not as a partner, not as an equal, as something unstable. You're changing, she said. Yes. She turned to leave, paused at the door. If this costs us, she said, don't expect me to protect you. He nodded. I wouldn't. The door closed. Daniel remained standing. He didn't feel victorious. He felt aligned. It was quieter than triumph, but stronger. He left the boardroom, walked past offices he'd named, people he employed, spaces he'd created. For the first time, he noticed how many people avoided eye contact with him, not out of respect, out of self-preservation. It unsettled him. He stepped into the elevator alone. The doors slid shut. The descent felt longer than usual, not physically, internally. Each floor felt like a layer of identity falling away. When the doors opened in the lobby, light flooded in. Natural, unfiltered, a contrast to the controlled glow upstairs. He stepped out and saw her. Lena stood near the security desk. She wasn't waiting for him. She was arguing with the guard, quietly. I just need a moment, she said. I left my gloves upstairs. The guard shook his head. No access without authorization. She sighed. They're my gloves. Daniel approached. It's fine, he said. The guard straightened immediately. Of course, sir. Daniel looked at Lena. You forgot something. Yes, she said. Sorry. He nodded toward the elevators. I'll go with you. She hesitated. You don't need to. I want to. They rode up together, in silence. Not awkward, not tense. Different. When the doors opened on her floor, she walked ahead. He followed. She retrieved her gloves from a supply cart, tucked them into her pocket, turned. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know. She studied him. You look different. So do you. She smiled faintly. Why did you really stop me? He hesitated. Not to calculate, to choose honesty. I wanted to say thank you, he said. For what? For disrupting me. She laughed softly. That sounds dangerous. It is, he said, but necessary. She tilted her head. You canceled the water thing, didn't you? He blinked. How did you know? I saw the way you looked at the screen, she said. You don't look at numbers like that unless you're saying goodbye. He nodded. Yes. She breathed out slowly. Good. He was surprised by how much that single word mattered to him. You shouldn't have that much influence, he said. She shrugged. You shouldn't have ignored it for so long. Another pause. Then he asked, Would you be willing to talk again? She stiffened slightly. About what? About things that don't show up in reports. She considered. I'm not a consultant. I don't want one. Then what do you want? A compass. She blinked. That's a lot to put on a stranger. I know, he said. I won't ask often. She hesitated. Why me? He answered without thinking. Because you don't want anything from me. She studied him. You don't know that. Yes, he said. I do. Silence again. Then she nodded once. All right. He exhaled. Not relief. Something steadier. Acceptance. I have to go, she said. He nodded. So do I. They walked together to the elevators. Different directions, different worlds. But something had shifted between them. Not romance, not power, understanding. The doors closed. Daniel stood alone again. But this time, alone felt spacious, not empty. He returned to his office, sat, opened his laptop, and began doing something he hadn't done in years. He listened. Not to markets, not to forecasts, to memory, to responsibility, to the quiet voice that had been buried beneath ambition. And he realized something that unsettled him deeply. He didn't want to be remembered. He wanted to be useful. Useful. The word stayed with him longer than any compliment ever had. It followed him out of the office that evening, through the quiet hallways, into the elevator, down into the city. The world outside felt louder than usual. Cars hissed over wet pavement. Voices overlapped on sidewalks. A street musician played something soft and imperfect on a violin near the entrance. Daniel stopped, not because he planned to, because the sound reached somewhere he hadn't visited in years. He stood there while people passed around him, watching the musician's fingers tremble slightly on the strings, not from fear, from care. Each note wasn't perfect. Each note was honest. He felt something loosen in his chest. He went home, not to a mansion, not to a penthouse, to an apartment he rarely used. White walls, quiet rooms, furniture chosen by someone else. He stood in the middle of it and felt how empty it actually was. Not lonely, unused. He slept that night without his phone beside him. No alarms, no alerts, no updates. Just sleep. And when he woke, something had shifted, not dramatically, subtly, like a wheel realigning. He didn't rush. He showered slowly, ate something warm, watched sunlight move across the floor. He went to work without his driver, walked 2 blocks, felt the city move around him instead of beneath him. At the office, he didn't go upstairs. He walked to the community impact department instead. A small floor, quiet, underfunded. Surprised faces turned toward him as he entered. "Good morning," he said. People froze, then stood, then panicked slightly. He raised a hand. "Please don't," he said gently. "I'm just here to listen." They didn't know how. He sat with them anyway, asked questions, not about profit, about problems, about water systems failing in dry regions, about food deserts, about housing shortages, about education gaps. He listened, took notes, not on a device, on paper. The act felt grounding, real. By noon, he felt more tired than he ever had after a 12-hour negotiation. But it was a clean tired, a meaningful one. He didn't cancel meetings. He changed them. He brought new people into rooms that had never seen faces like theirs. Engineers who worked in villages, teachers from public schools, doctors from rural clinics. They didn't speak like executives. They spoke like humans. It changed the tone of everything. Some board members resisted. Some investors complained. Some analysts resigned. He accepted it, not coldly, calmly. He wasn't shrinking. He was redirecting. 3 weeks later, he saw Lena again. Not in the office, at a public forum. She stood near the back of a small auditorium, holding a notebook, listening to a speaker talk about sustainable infrastructure. He approached quietly. "You came," he said. She turned, smiled. "I was curious. So was I." They sat together, not as billionaire and cleaner, not as power and service, as 2 people trying to understand the same future from different sides. Afterward, they walked outside. Evening light softened the city. "I hear you're making trouble," she said. He smiled. I hear you're responsible. She laughed. That's not fair. It is, he said, but not in the way you think. She looked at him. You didn't do this for me. No. But you didn't do it without me either. He nodded. That's true. They stood in silence for a moment. Comfortable. Open. You're still powerful, she said. Yes. But now you're careful with it. I hope so. She studied him. You're different. Yes. Do you miss who you were? He considered. No, he said. But I understand him now. She nodded. That's how healing works. He smiled faintly. They parted without ceremony. No promises, no drama. Just a shared direction. Months passed. The company stabilized. Not around domination, around contribution. Markets adapted. Investors adjusted. Governments negotiated. Daniel learned that the world didn't collapse when you stopped squeezing it. It responded. Slowly, but it responded. Water initiatives became partnerships instead of acquisitions. Education programs became investments. Infrastructure became support, not ownership. He still made money, just not at the cost of dignity. One afternoon, he visited a small village where a new water system had been installed, not by his company alone, but with it. Children ran through open spaces laughing, not thirsty, not afraid, just alive. He watched them, not as data, not as impact metrics, as lives. And something in him settled, not pride, peace. Later, he wrote a letter, not to shareholders, not to governments, to himself. It said, you were never meant to be a machine. You were meant to be a bridge. He folded it, put it away. He didn't need to read it again. He had already become it. And somewhere in the city, a woman who once carried a mop continued to carry truth into rooms that forgot how to hold it. And a man who once ruled from above learned how to walk among, not as a king, as a participant, as a listener, as someone finally, fully useful.